Mr. and Mrs. Smith, my wife is a highly trained public relations professional and works for a medical company. I work for an auto parts company and I'm a senior warehouse operator. In fact, I help manage a warehouse of 300 people. I'm not a supervisor, but I'm well respected and I'm very good at my job. My wife Louisa and I are both 45 years old, but we could easily pass for much younger. We go to the gym regularly and work out together. We have been married for 20 years. We have no children. It was our mutual choice. My wife is Mexican and very beautiful, like Ariana Grande, only a little taller and with a little more curves. Long black hair, Hispanic facial features, and a Hispanic temperament. That's what my wife is. Aya? Well, my job is very labor-intensive and it keeps me fit and strong. I lost my hair 15 years ago. Louise now shaves my head every 2 weeks. In my opinion, there is nothing worse than seeing men clinging to their hair. To see a man with a fleece or a failed hair transplant, or worse, in a wig, is just very sad. Anyway, the thing is, my wife likes my ex-goth/biker image. Yes, I wear black clothes every day. Yes, I have a leather jacket and pants. And yes, I sometimes grow a goatee. I'm of average height, but I'm broad-shouldered and strong. My family and my wife's family are pretty conservative, and the way I dress makes me raise my eyebrows. But the most important person in the world to me is my wife. And over the years, Louise has proven time and time again that she loves me and is as devoted to me as I am to her. Many times we have gone on dates or vacations wherever we go. Men have tried to try their luck. But being the polite and friendly person she is, she always declines with a smile any invitations to dance or accept a drink from strange men. But she doesn't take any nonsense. No, it's a definite no. It can't be. And I'm scary enough to make most men back off. Louise dresses in leather on weekends, but only on weekends. Her dress code at work is smart casual, and that's how she dresses. She often tells me about young women wearing short skirts or almost see-through blouses to attract men at work. But as I said, she's not interested in that. She's a total professional, work is work, and her personal life is our business. 2 weeks ago, a new CEO was appointed, and Louise now works for him. On the first day, Louise told me who he was, and he seemed to accept that she was married and good at her job. There is one potential problem. Her new boss is an ex-boyfriend from years ago, long before we became a couple. Louise told me that the first week there was no talk of their shared past or what they once had, but things have changed. His name is Dexter Wilson. And according to Louise, he is of average height, a little overweight, with thinning hair, clearly a wealthy man, driving a Mercedes SLK AMG Custom. He is twice divorced and has 2 children from each marriage. He is the same age as us. Louise told me all about him and how he treated her. They had been in a relationship for a year when she found out that he had cheated on her with 4 different women, and if you do a bit of digging, it turns out that his last ex-wife left him because he cheated on her as well. He really is a serial cheater and clearly can't control himself. There's a saying in England about men like this, the gift of gab. This means that they say all the right things to everyone they come in contact with, impress them and talk nicely to people, but especially women. Obviously, he's very charming. This led to a problem that my wife told me about during his second week there. On Friday of the second week, Louise came home spitting fire as soon as she walked in the door. I, of course, asked what the problem was. That's the problem. You know, he goes around telling people at work that I'm sorry I left him. He told my best friend Jenny that he's going to sleep with me soon. I hope you told HR about this, I said in a neutral tone. Yes, Gary, of course I told them, but they said they would investigate and it could take a few weeks, she said angrily. I stood up and hugged my wife. After a few seconds, she hugged me back. When she calmed down, we both had coffee and relaxed, and shortly after we went upstairs to bed, I thought about just hugging, but I didn't expect Louise to pounce on me. She plopped me down on the bed. When she pulled away, she relaxed. She laid her head on my chest and sighed happily. I'm sorry, Gary. I needed that. I'm so mad at that asshole. I needed to either have wild sex with you to get over my anger or kill him. I laughed. Okay, either way, I'm not complaining. You were definitely on top of things. So what are you going to do about that asshole? Other than strangle him and cut his balls off, I'm not sure. Louise said it softly. She had definitely become less angry after relieving her tension and stress. We both fell asleep that night, and in the morning Louise got dressed for work in a business suit which suited her very well. To me, she always looked beautiful and very professional. While we were having breakfast, she looked at me. "Gary, how would you feel about talking to my ex-boyfriend? Maybe explain a couple things to him?" "Well, I've never met him, so it would be interesting to meet him. Why don't you bring him to the house and he and I can have a civilized conversation about him harassing a married woman?" Louise jumped up and hugged me. "Gary, I love you so much. I'm going to tell him that my psychopathic husband wants to talk to him. I might embellish your reputation a bit. But it would be funny if he thought you were in a biker gang. So when I bring him home, get dressed in your leathers. I'll get dressed too. And between us, we'll be able to convince him to leave me alone." So that's exactly what we were going to do, only I wanted to expand the plan a little bit. So here I am in my leather clothes, sitting in my chair waiting for my wife to come home with her boss in tow. I sipped my pint of cider. It was refreshing. I looked around the living room where 10 other couples were sitting, also dressed in leather, and we all raised our glasses in greeting. The CD was playing AC/DC Highway to Hell very loudly. But our neighbors, Susan and Darren, had joined the party. There was food on the table, and of course, more beer and cider. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. While I was at work, I asked some Eastern European co-workers if they wanted to have a little fun by dressing up and having a party at my house. 8 male co-workers said they would love to attend the party and bring their wives and girlfriends, and 2 lesbian couples said they wanted to join the party. So almost all Eastern European men are big, stocky, well-built, and mean-looking, and at first glance, seeing all of us in leather jackets and the women in leather jackets too, it can be a bit intimidating. Well, that was the plan. And yes, even their wives and girlfriends look a bit intimidating in those outfits. In the morning, Louise once again dressed very sexy for work. She was wearing a short leather miniskirt and a leather coat showing a lot of cleavage. She also wore knee-high leather boots with a 6-inch heel. At noon, I texted Louise asking if she had convinced her boss to come home to meet me. She said they were on their way, would be there in 5 minutes. She also said that he couldn't take his eyes off her body all day. When he first saw her at work, he practically drooled, and he got very close to her a couple times, but she reminded him that she wouldn't let him do anything until he talked to me and asked for my consent. He was obviously feeling a mixture of elation and disappointment most of the day. He didn't seem to be used to being told no and made to wait for the woman he was pursuing. The party was in full swing. Metallica, the Black Album, was playing on the CD. When the first strings of Enter Sandman sounded, Peter, one of the single men from work, looked out the window and saw my wife's car pull up, followed by a silver Mercedes. "Gary, they're here!" he said loudly, walking over to me. I stood up, and the 2 largest men in the warehouse, George and Felix, 2 brothers, at least 6'3", and both very broad-shouldered, stood up with me. They walked behind me as we walked to the front door. As soon as I got to the door, my wife opened it, saw me, and smiled, and then said to the men behind me, "George, Felix, it's good to see you again. Don't go. Gary may need you in a few minutes. Don't forget to yell at my boss." "Don't worry, Louise, we've got Gary's back. It's good to see you too. If you ever want to leave Gary for a real man, let me know." Felix looked at me and smiled widely. Louise put her arms around me and kissed me deeply. She turned to Felix. "Felix, you have no hope. You have no idea how to treat a woman. There is a reason you and your brother are both single." She laughed at the mock-hurt expression on his face. At that moment, Dexter walked up the driveway and stood uncertainly on the threshold. Louise turned to him and smiled. "Dexter, this is my husband, Gary. This is Dexter. And apparently he wants your blessing to ask me out, and he has made it clear he wants me." Felix and George looked at this heavy-set, almost bald man and laughed, and George said, "Trust me, Dexter, you have a good chance of getting Gary's approval. Why don't you just turn around and go sleep with her?" Dexter did what I would never have expected a sane man to do. He told me in front of witnesses what he wanted to do to my wife. He stood up to his full height and puffed up his chest. "Gary, I'm not asking for your approval. I'm going to take your wife to an expensive restaurant, treat her to the best meal of her life, then take her to a very expensive hotel, get a room, and then..." He dropped to the floor like a sack of potatoes. I stood over him, about to hit him again, but Louise, laughing, said, Gary, my love, that punch was good enough. I think he got the point. She stood up and hugged me. Thank you. I've wanted to do that for a week now, but he's my boss, and I probably wouldn't have been approved, but in this case, you defended my honor. I turned to Felix and George. Guys, do me a favor. Get rid of him. Find the nastiest part of town and dump his car in the middle of it, and don't forget to leave the car unlocked while he takes a nap from the crane I gave him. Don't worry, Gary. We know some very questionable people in a certain part of town, said Felix, smirking. Various people from the house came out to see the incident. They saw Felix and George pull Dexter into his car. Felix got behind the wheel of Dexter's car, and George followed in his car. Louise kissed me again and said she would go upstairs to change into something more casual if possible. We all went back to the living room and everyone continued the party. 10 minutes later, Louise walked into the living room wearing a leather vest, mini skirt, and knee-length boots. She walked through the crowd of dancers and headed towards me. I sat in my chair and drank my cider, looking at the sexiest woman I knew and will ever know. The guests stopped and stood smiling as Louise set my glass down, took my hand, helped me up, and wrapped her body around me, and then kissed me passionately. We ignored the clapping and cheers of approval from the guests. Someone changed the CD to a rock ballad, Bon Jovi's In My Arms Tonight, started playing. We danced and swayed to the music, and other couples joined us. The party was fun. Everyone had a good time. A few couples had sex in different parts of the house, but it wasn't a swingers party. All the couples stayed couples, and the house was big enough for everyone to find a private place. The night ended with everyone going home at 3 in the morning. Everyone was very happy, and the different couples agreed to keep in touch. Our neighbors were the last to leave, promising that the next costume party would be at their house. That night, Louise and I made love all night. By morning, we were both exhausted. I was awakened by a knock on the door. I got up, leaving my naked wife sleeping under the covers. I put on my gym pants and t-shirt and went downstairs. When I opened the door, I saw Felix and George standing on the doorstep with huge grins on their faces. Felix handed me a newspaper, the front page of which had a picture of Dexter lying naked on a bed in an obviously very dirty bedroom. The caption under the photo read, "Local businessman Dexter Wilson was found this morning in the company of several male and female prostitutes working in what appears to be a red light district in one of our city's neighborhoods. His car, a Mercedes SLK AMG model, was found near a hotel known as a brothel. His car was found on concrete blocks. Everything of value was removed from it." Smiles appeared on Felix and George's faces. "Gary, don't worry. He wasn't hurt, and everything that was done to him was done with his consent. Well, mostly his consent anyway. We just wanted you to know that he won't be bothering your wife anymore. Apparently, he's looking for another job." At this point, Louise came downstairs dressed in one of my t-shirts and a pair of my boxer shorts. Felix and George looked at each other, then at me, and both had huge grins on their faces. "Guys, this lady is definitely off the menu. You can stare and speculate all you want, but you will never go near her. Remember, I'm a psycho and a very jealous husband. I could snap at any moment," said I sternly as Louise hugged me. Felix and George stepped back with their arms outstretched. Felix spoke first. "Gary, I'm sorry, my friend. I didn't mean to hurt you, and don't worry, you're like a brother to us. We would never hurt you or your wife. We're just messing with you. Besides, George and I met 2 wonderful ladies last night, and we have a date with them tonight." Louise laughed and said, "Good luck to you and them. Treat them carefully, and don't forget to pay them as soon as you leave the hotel." I handed her the paper, and she laughed even harder. "George, Felix, thank you for that. Nothing could have happened to a nicer person. That explains the message from work. Apparently there will be a new CEO from Monday. A woman, apparently Dexter, called and said he changed his mind about the job and tendered his resignation. The board of directors have obviously seen the story, and they are going to make his life very difficult." Louise walked around me and kissed both brothers on the cheek, then turned and walked into the house. As she walked up the stairs, she turned around and said, "Gary, I need to wash my back in the shower." She walked on, and I turned to my brothers, shook their hands, and said, "Sometimes a man has to do what a man has to do. See you at work. Have a nice evening." Felix held out a flash drive to me. Gary, there are some very incriminating recordings on this flash drive. It's up to you. But if you really want to make this asshole's life a torment, then post these recordings on a website. These days, nobody cares who posts them. Either way, go enjoy your shower, you happy bastard. He put a hand on my shoulder and pushed me into the house. I closed the door, climbed the stairs, and found myself naked in record time. Louise was just getting into the shower. I stood for a while, looking at her beautiful body, and then joined her. Life is good. I am married to a very beautiful and sexy woman, and no one will come between us.